Okay, people, I'm back. Sorry. Alright, so I stopped at, I started to do number 7, but my pen wouldn't work. So let's pick back up at number 7. This is the last question over series and sequences. So, number 7 says, Bobby sold 300 t-shirts in the first month of opening his new store. Historically, sales of t-shirts will fall by 15% each month. What is the total number of shirts sold in 4 months? Okay, so we already did this in number 1. Just a different scenario. So we are looking for 4. So SN is going to be S4. T1 is the first term. So in the first month, Bobby sold 300 shirts. My rate, okay, it says that it will fall by 15%. Now, this is where it'll get you, okay? The word fall means to decrease, all right? So, a whole percent, the whole thing is 100%. If it is falling by 15% or it is decreasing, then you have to subtract that 15% to get 85%. So your rate is 0.85 because the problem tells us that it falls by 15%. In other words, it's 85%, okay? And our number of months is 4, all right? So I'm going to take this information and I'm going to plug it in. So first, we have T1, which is, oops, why does it keep doing that? Okay, I don't know. T1, which is 300, parentheses, alpha, y equals, to get a fraction bar, we have 1 minus r, which is 0.85. And it is raised to the power of the number of months, which is 4. On the bottom, we have 1 minus r again. You close your parentheses, and you should get that you sell 955.98 shirts. So, in this case, we're only selling a total of 955 shirts because that 0.98 of a shirt is probably missing a thread, or it's missing a sleeve, or it's missing something. So it's not a whole shirt. So we're just selling 955 shirts. Okay? All right. Oops, I did not mean to do that. So now on number 8, yesterday in class you were supposed to star it because that meant it was on the test. So inverse means first you swap x and y and then you solve for y. Okay? So there's 3 options. A is linear, B is quadratic, and C is exponential. So I'm going to work them up here at the top so I have room. So first we have y equals 2x. Swap them. Divide by 2. So the inverse is x over 2. All right. Next, we have y equals x squared. So first thing we're going to do is swap, and we get x equals y squared. Well, I have to get rid of that square. And in order to get rid of a square, I must take the square root. These cancel, and I'm left with the square root of x, or my inverse. Okay? Now, for the last one, you must know that the inverse of an exponential is a log. The form is y equals b to the x. Y equals log base b of x. You must know that, guys. Like, you've got to know it. Okay? All right, number 9 says f of x equals x squared plus 9. Which is true? Okay. All right, if you look, all of your answer choices have this f of -1. So this tells you that you're going to have to first find the inverse before you do anything. All right, once you swap your x and y, first we subtract 9. And we know that x minus 9 is just x minus 9. Well, now to get rid of a square, we must take the square root. So, f of -1x is the square root of x minus 9. Okay? Now, you have 3 choices. F of -1 of 12 equals the square root of 3. F of -1, 10 equals 0. F of -1 of -3 is 18. And F -1 of -2 is 4. So what that means, those numbers in the parentheses, okay, are your input values. Those are your x values. You see how right here in the parentheses is an x, and there's an x in my equation? Well, for the first one, we're going to need to plug in the number 12. Now, you have to think, what is 12 minus 9? Well, it's 3, and we have to keep the square root, because if you type in the square root of 3 in your calculators, you get 1.732050808. Sorry, a long decimal. We don't want to write a long decimal. We just want to be simple, and we just want to say the square root of 3. All right? If I wanted to try something else, if I just say for some reason I second guess, and I was like, oh, that ain't right. So now, C tells us to plug in the number 10. Well, the square root of 10 minus 9 is the square root of 1. And the square root of 1 is just 1. But this tells us we're supposed to get 0, so it ain't right. If you plug in a -3, you got the square root of -3 minus 9. And it is not 18. It's an imaginary number. Same thing with D. So our answer has to be A. All right. Number 10, find the inverse of f of x equals 2x plus 3. Well, f of x means y. First, we must swap x and y. Then we solve for y. To get rid of the 2, we divide. So our inverse is x minus 3 over 2. Okay? Now, same thing with this one. It wants us to plug in the number 4. So for the inverse, you see the x is in the parentheses and the x is in the equation. Well, if I change that to say 4, then I'm plugging in a 4 for the x. So then you just simplify. 4 minus 3 is 1 and 2. So your answer is 1/2. All right, number 11. I love this one. So, h of x equals x minus 3 squared divided by 9. Okay? So, first thing we have to do is we have to say y equals x minus 3 squared divided by 9. Then we must swap. X equals y minus 3 squared divided by 9. Now we have to solve for y. So first, I'm going to multiply by the number 9 on both sides. And I am left with 9x equals y minus 3 squared. Okay? So, first, what I'm going to do to get rid of the square is I'm going to take the square root of both sides. These cancel, and I'm simply left with the square root of 9x equals y minus 3. Okay? Now, right here, the square root of 9x is the same thing as me saying the square root of 9 times the square root of x equals y minus 3. What's the square root of 9? 3. Can you simplify the square root of x? Nope. Now, to get y by itself, I have to add 3 to both sides. So does this make this 6 square root of x? No. The answer is no. It makes it 3 square root x plus 3 equals y. That is because 3 and square root of x are multiplying. So you can't just throw that positive 3 on there and say, oh, 3 plus 3 is 6. No, doesn't work that way. Okay? All right, next. Number 12. I love this one too. All right, it says y equals 1/3 x squared plus 7. X equals 1/3 y squared plus 7. I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides, and I get x minus 7 equals 1/3 y squared. Now, before I take the square root, I've got to get rid of that denominator. So, I'm going to multiply by 3 on both sides. And then I simplify. 3x minus 21 equals y squared. To get rid of a square, we take the square root. So, The inverse of number 12 is the square root of 3x minus 21. Okay? Now, 13. I think you were supposed to put a star beside it because I told you it was an exact problem. So first, it says find the inverse of f of x equals x minus 10 divided by 4. Select all that apply. That means you have more than one answer. You have at least two. Okay? So first we have to find the inverse. This just means y. So we're swapping x equals y minus 10 over 4. To get rid of the 4, I must multiply on both sides. And I'm left with 4x equals y minus 10. To get rid of the negative 10, I must add. No, that is not 14x. You cannot combine because it's not like terms. So the inverse is just 4x plus 10. Now, I want you to look at your choices. So, two of the answers has other equations in it. C tells me that the inverse is 4 divided by x minus 10. Is that what we just got? No. All they did right there was flip the numerator and the denominator, and that is not correct. So you can mark it out. So, E might be your answer because it has the correct function rule. But you've got to check and say, if I plug in a negative 2 for that x, am I going to get an 18? Okay? So I'm going to exit out of this, and I am going to pull up our calculator. So we are plugging in into the inverse. We're looking at E right now. 4, it tells me to plug in a 2 plus 10. It says I should get 18. Is that what E says? Yes, it does. So we know that E is an answer. Okay? Now, look at your remaining choices. A, B, and D. Okay? They all have similar things. They either say f of something equals something, or they say the inverse of something equals something. Well, since you know that E is an answer, and if you plug in 2 for the inverse, you get out 18. You can mark out D because it tells us for the inverse right here, we plug in 18 and get out a half. Well, that ain't right. It ain't right. So then you have A and B. A tells me if I plug in 18, I should get out a negative 2. But is that what E says? No, and we know E is correct. So I can mark out A, and we already marked out C. So it's got to be B. So now, to double check ourselves, it tells me right here to plug in the number 18 for the original function f of x and I should get out the number 2. So that is correct. That works. Okay. All right. Moving on to number 14, we're hitting in the transformation, so this should not take long at all because we went over all of these in class yesterday. Okay? So, let me get rid of our calculator. Whoops. All right. 14 says, from f of x to f of x plus 3 minus 2, what does the graph do? This graph is doing two things. X plus 3 is on the inside. It's our h value. You have to remember that this is what it started with. So in order for that sign to change from a positive to a negative, that 3, not the 3, our h value would have been a negative 3. When h is negative, it moves to the left. So, f of x plus 3 means we move to the left. Now, that minus 2 on the outside, that's our k value. K values are easy. If they're positive, it's moving up the y-axis. If it's negative, it's moving down. So this is going down 2. Okay? Number 15. From x squared to y equals negative 0.75 times x minus 4 squared plus 5. What does the graph do? So, this is what we started with. Okay, this is our original parent function for a transformation graph. This graph is doing 4 things. We're going to start left to right. So, since there's a negative, that means it reflects the x-axis. Then we look at the 0.75. That's our a value. Well, that is between 0 and 1. And when we are a baby, from the time we're born until the time we turn 1, we are a fat baby. So we're kind of wide. So that means the graph is vertically compressed or shrunk, which just means it gets wide. Okay? Then it says x minus 4 squared. What's just our h value? Just our h value is a positive 4. So we are going to the right 4. And then we have a positive 5 on the outside. So that means we go up 5. Okay? All right. Let me go to the last page. And number 16. This is a question on the test, but not exactly, but kind of, sort of. So, it says, if f of x equals x minus 3, match each function to its graph. So, I already drew f of x equals x minus 3. That's the same thing as me saying y equals mx plus b. That's just a slope intercept, okay? Just a linear function. So, in this case, our m is 1 and our b is a negative 3, which is why I started our graph at negative 3 and I went up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1. Okay? Now, you're given 3 graphs and you're given 4 options. Think about what I said yesterday. Have we even looked at horizontal reflections, horizontal dilations, or anything? No. So you can go ahead and mark out D, because we hadn't even talked about it yet. All right? Now, A says f of x minus 3. Well, now you have to use your transformation rules. X minus 3. It's on the inside, so h value. When it says x minus something, that means we go to the right. B, f of x plus 3. Transformation rules. X plus 3 is on the inside. It's a h value, so it's going to the left. C, you see a negative sign. Negative f of x. So that is going to be a reflection or a flip. So now you look at your graphs and your original graph that I gave you. Which graph is moving more to the right? The first, second, or third? The first. It's moving 3 units to the right. The second graph, it goes 3 units to the left. And the last graph is the only one that is reflected, so that has to be C. Okay? All right. 18. How would you move the sliders to create the graph of 1, f of x plus 3 minus 2? So I would move my slider, my H slider, three units left to make it negative 3. And I would use my K slider 2 units down to make it a negative 2. For the second one, f of x minus 4 plus 2. Well, I would go 4 units right to make h a positive 4. And I would go 2 units up to make k a 2. Number 18 says you are given y equals x minus 2 squared plus 2. What would happen to the rule if it is translated 4 units down? So you know that h values move left to right. Does it say anything about left to right? No. So you're simply going to keep x minus 2 squared. Now, I start at positive 2, but I'm going down 4. So 2 minus 4 is negative 2. Okay? Now, we answered 19, 20, and 21 in class. Um, 22. think we answered that in class. What does the graph look like? Well, linear is a straight line. Quadratic is the U. Exponential is a Nike sign. And square root is an eyebrow. 23. What is the inverse of the following? Well, the inverse of a quadratic is a square root, and the inverse of exponential is a log. If you forget, for some crazy reason, then you can look on your calculator, okay? So, we're looking for a quadratic. Quadratic is x squared. Here's x squared. Hold on, let me use my pen. Here is x squared. Right here. There we go. Here's x squared. Right there. Just let me punch it. X squared. Now, if you look above that, in blue is the square root. That is the inverse. Then, if you look for exponential, it says 10 to the x. Below that is the log. Calculator literally tells you the answer. Okay? On 24, it just asks you how to find the inverse. Step 1, swap x and y. Step 2, solve for y. Okay? All right, if you still need help, please let me know. Please let me know. Please let me know. I cannot tell you how many times I have said that on all these videos. If you need help, guys, you've got to let me know. I will be glad to help you. I don't have students today, so let me know. Bye.